Hello, it's Hong here. If you are in Human Biology Advanced, this video will guide you through the process of analysing the raw data collected from the caffeine experiment in Practical 2. I have some dummy data here, and the spreadsheet you would have downloaded from Blackboard is structured in the same way, so you can work through your data as I do the same with this dummy data set. Now, recall that the research question you are wanting to answer is, does the consumption of caffeine enhance exercise performance? And we use the change in pulse rate and the change in respiration rate after an exercise test as a measure of exercise performance. You also looked at the effect of caffeine on the resting pulse rate and the resting respiration rate. Now, we had two groups labeled A or B, and they were named this way because the experiment was done in a double-blind trial, which meant no one, including the data collectors, the subjects or the demonstrators, knew which group drank caffeinated coffee and which group drank decaffeinated coffee. Okay, in biology, we are usually interested in the population response. So the means and some measure of variability is what we're looking for. And we want to calculate these figures for each group. So notice in the spreadsheet that in column B, the data is not sorted by group, which is not very helpful for us. So let's select all the columns that contain data. Go to the top menu bar and select data and then sort. And this window will pop up. Okay, you have a choice of categories to sort by. For us, it's going to be by group, and we select OK. Okay, so now you know, or you can see that the data for subjects in group A are grouped at the top, and all the data for subjects in group B sit below that. Okay, so what I want to do is move all this data for group B over next to group A. I don't want it sitting underneath the data for group A, because that will make my life so much easier when I calculate the means and standard deviations. Okay, so I'm going to copy these headings over first. So what I've done is I've selected them, and I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut Command-C to copy if you're using a Mac. Select Control-C if you're using a PC, and then use the keyboard shortcut Command-V for a Mac to paste. If you're using a PC, select Control-V. Okay. I'm also going to insert a new row on top of these headings. Okay, and so what I've done is I've just right-clicked where column row 2 is, and then selected Insert. Just to pretty things up a bit, I'm going to select these cells from C1 to H1, and I'm going to merge them. Okay, this is data for group A. And I'm going to do the same for cells I1 to N1. I'm going to merge these cells, and in this new merged cell, I'm going to label it as group B. In your spreadsheet, you would have the information about which group drank which treatment. Okay, so let's just say that group A drank caffeinated coffee in my example. So it would be a lot more informative if you labeled it as the actual treatment, because group A and group B is not very informative. So let's say in my example that group A drank decaffeinated coffee. Okay, so I'm going to move the data from group B, or in this case decaffeinated coffee, the decaffeinated treatment group. Okay, so what I've done is I've selected this first cell in this data set for group B. I've selected the shift key and selected the cell diagonally across from the first cell that I've selected, and this makes a cell select all the data within this box. Alright, so copy and, well, you can actually cut and paste. So I'm using Command X to cut. Use Control X if you're using a PC. Okay. And all that data from Group B, or the decaffeinated treatment group, is now moved over next to the data for the caffeinated treatment group. Alright, I don't need this information about Group A or Group B anymore. Okay, it's not very informative. I'm going to clear this data in column A, because I still want to keep column A, but I just want to put in different headings or different information. So you can right click and clear contents. If you're using a Mac, you can use your keyboard shortcut Control B. Not sure what the equivalent is for a PC though, sorry. Okay, so we need to do some data crunching now. We want to calculate the means, the standard deviation, and you also need to report the sample size for each of the groups. So we'll also get Excel to work that out for us. Let me just fix up this column. The great thing about Excel is that it can make all these calculations for you, which saves a lot of time. You don't have to do it manually. To calculate the mean, type in equals, which tells Excel that you want it to do some maths for you. Then type average. You can type it in lower or uppercases, it doesn't matter. Open brackets, and you'll be prompted to select the values that you want to calculate the average for. So select all the raw data in this column, close brackets, then select enter. Okay, and there's the mean for this data set. Alright, so click on the cell that just has this calculated value and hover your cursor over the bottom right hand corner, and you'll see this black cross show up. Then drag the formula across to the end of your table. And when you select on any of these newly calculated values, you realize that Excel has calculated the mean for each column. Okay, so that is pretty cool, and it saves you a lot of time from having to either calculate the means manually, or even just saves you time from having to retype the formula at the bottom of each column. Okay, for standard deviation, you want to type equals STDEV, which stands for standard deviation, open brackets, and again select the raw data that you selected to calculate the mean, and drag the formula across. Excel usually presents the means and standard deviation to 7, 8, or 9 decimal places, which is a ridiculous number of decimal places and totally unnecessary for your report. So I'm going to clean this up. So I've selected all these calculated means and standard deviation values. Once you've done that, go up to the menu bar, the toolbox up in the top, and look for the icon that has an arrow pointing towards the right, followed by a bunch of zeros. Okay. Every time you click on this icon, the number of decimal places will decrease. Okay. I will choose to present them to 1 decimal place. For you guys, no more than 2. Okay, the final thing we need to calculate is the sample size, and for this, type in equals count, open brackets, select the raw data, close brackets, and enter. Let me just get rid of this. It was something I was working on before, but you don't need to see that. Okay, so if you feel that presenting the data in a table would be more appropriate for the report. You don't need to go any further. You just need to create two tables, one to present the respiration data and one to present the pulse rate data. And within each table, you need to present the mean, the standard deviation, and the sample size. And of course, have informative table descriptions accompanying each table. If, however, you feel that presenting your data in a graph would be more appropriate, what you'll need to do is create two graphs, one for the respiration data and one for the pulse rate data. I will just create one graph because the process will be the same for creating your second graph. Okay, so you want to present your data as a column graph. Okay, so you can either choose to go to the Charts tab, go into Column, and then selecting a clustered column, and you'll have this blank chart appear. Alternatively, you can go up to the top menu bar, select Insert, then Chart. Now we want to populate this chart with some data. So let's right click on the background, click on Select Data, and this window will pop up. Alright, so for each graph you need to add in two series of data. One is for your data from the caffeinated group, and the other series is data from the subjects who drank decaffeinated coffee. Okay, so currently this series of data is labeled as series 1, and you can see that in the key here, which is not informative. So let's rename it to something that is. So for example, caffeinated. Okay. To select the data, go to Y values and click on this red arrow. And we want this graph to show the resting pulse rate, pre-treatment data, post-treatment, and the final pulse rate. And of course, you only want to present the means because we're interested in the population response. Okay, so just highlight the three means. Right, and then so you can see that in this graph you can see the means pop up here. Later we'll need to add in data for the category X axis labels, but we'll do that later because we haven't set that up yet. Before we click OK, let's add in the data for the decaffeinated group. Okay, so let's rename this to decaffeinated and select the Y values. Okay, so far in the graph, our x-axis labels are 1, 2, and 3. This is a default setting from Excel. It's not informative, so we need to rectify that. Select an empty cell near your graph, and let's put in the labels that we want to appear on the graph. Okay. So what I'll do is type in pre-treatment, post-treatment, or pre-exercise, and post-exercise. For some reason this is in bold, doesn't matter though. Alright, so let's right click on the background of the chart again, select data, and next to category X axis labels, click on the red arrow and select the labels that you just typed into your spreadsheet, and then OK. So you can see that these labels have transferred over into my x-axis. We still need to fix up the y-axis though. We need to have a y-axis title to begin with. So just select your graph and you should have more options appear on your tabs. Okay, I want to go to chart layout and select a rotated vertical axis title. And here I have the mean pulse rate. Make sure you add in the units, beats per minute. And there we go. If you want, you can add in an x-axis title. For grid lines, you don't really need them, so just select one of them and hit the delete key. You can move around your key here to wherever you wish. I prefer to have them on the top right hand corner of my graph. You also need to add in error bars that represent your standard deviation values. So when someone reads your report, they can see the means, okay, but they also need to know the variability of your data set. To do this, double left click one of the columns in each of the series. So I'm going to double click one of the blue columns. A new window will pop up. Go to error bars. You'll need to display positive and negative values, positive and negative error bars. You'll have a choice to have caps or no caps. I prefer to have caps on mine. And then go down to choose custom values. Okay, you'll be prompted to select positive error values and negative error values. So for positive error values, for the caffeinated group, select your standard deviation values and do the same for negative error values. And then OK. Do the same for your second data series. Okay, so in my case, I need to add in error bars representing standard deviation for the decaffeinated group. So double left click one of the columns. I'm going to display both positive and negative values and have caps on mine. And then select the standard deviation values for the decaffeinated group. Okay, so you might have noticed that with the inclusion of error bars, the scale on the y-axis has changed. It's become a little bit more crowded. So I want to clean this up a bit. So double click one of the values, and in this pop-up window, change the major unit. Okay, so I'll change mine to 40, and you'll see that it looks a lot cleaner. And it's also unnecessary to have your values presented to one decimal place. This is a default setting by Excel because our standard deviation and means were presented to one decimal place. Okay, so if you want to get rid of that decimal place in your y-axis, go to number, uncheck link to source, and go type in 0 under decimal places and then click OK. Okay, so this is how you create a graph for your report. Just make sure you create a second graph to present your respiration data. I hope you found this tutorial helpful, and all the best with the rest of your report.